Real Housewives is a franchise built on the performance of wealth. The private jets, the designer wardrobes, the vacation homes, the charity galas, all of it projects a life so far above ordinary financial concern that money seems irrelevant. For several of the women who have appeared on these shows, that projection was the problem because when the camera stopped rolling, the bills came due. These are the stories. There is a saying that has been attributed to Bethany Frankel, who has seen more of the Real Housewives world from the inside than almost anyone still willing to comment on it publicly. She told a magazine that the women she had met through the franchise often can't afford the lives they're living. She was not talking about one or two outliers. She was describing a pattern she had observed across multiple cities and multiple seasons. Women and the husbands attached to them, constructing a public performance of financial success that the actual numbers behind the scenes could not sustain. The camera has always been the most expensive prop in the franchise. And for the women on this list, it was also the most dangerous one. The story of Real Housewives' bankruptcy begins in Orange County, which is where the entire franchise began. The first major case was Tammy Knickerbocker, who was cast on Season 2 of Real Housewives of Orange County, specifically because her financial situation was part of her storyline. She and her late husband Lou had at one point lived in the largest house in the Costa Daza gated community, the kind of property that defines what Orange County projects to the outside world. By March of 2000, they had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The business had collapsed. The mansion was gone. Tammy joined a television show about wealthy Orange County women while actively rebuilding from a financial catastrophe, which is perhaps the most honest version of what the franchise has always been about. What Tammy's story established very early was the architecture of how these collapses tend to work. There is a period of genuine wealth followed by a business failure or economic shock followed by an attempt to maintain the appearance of the lifestyle, while the foundation has already given way. The cameras then arrive or continue to roll during the period of managed performance, the version of the life that is still being presented to neighbors and social contacts and viewers. While the real financial picture is being managed in courts and creditors' offices that no one on the show is discussing directly, the next Orange County case was considerably messier and considerably more visible because by the time it happened, the cameras had gotten much better at catching what people did not want them to see. Lynn Curtain joined RHC in Season 4 in 2008, and her financial situation was already precarious before she ever appeared on screen. Her husband, Frank, was a contractor who had not worked in several years, having been devastated by the 2008 housing market collapse that destroyed significant portions of the Orange County construction and real estate industry. The couple owed $1.26 to $6 million to a former business partner, who claimed they had never repaid a loan made to fund projects that never materialized. They had already been evicted multiple times before joining the show. By the time Season 5 was filming in 2009, they were on their fourth eviction in a year. What made Lynn's situation franchise history rather than just a sad financial story was the scene that aired in Season 5 where her daughter Raquel answered the door and was served eviction papers on camera in the middle of filming with a film crew standing right behind her. The landlord did not announce himself in advance. The eviction paperwork was real. The cameras captured it happening in real time. Frank, it later emerged, had concealed from Lynn that they had defaulted on a $10,000 deposit on the rental property. He had not told her they owed back rent or that the notice was coming. She found out the same way her daughter did. Lynn told a court during subsequent proceedings. Everyone thinks because of the show we're gazillionaires. The irony of that statement is nearly complete. They were on a television show about wealthy Orange County women. They had been evicted 4 times. The gap between what the cameras projected and what the court documents confirmed was in the Curtain case absolute. Teresa Giudice and Joe Giudice are the most famous bankruptcy case in Real Housewives history. And the reason they are famous is not just the money. It is that their bankruptcy eventually became a criminal proceeding. And the criminal proceeding sent both of them to prison. The Giudices filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in October 2009. During the same period, they were appearing on The Real Housewives of New Jersey. Their filing listed more than $10 million owed to various creditors. The numbers were staggering in their specificity. $14,000 in credit card debt, $85,600 in home repairs, and an array of other obligations that painted the picture of two people who had spent years living at a level that had no connection to their actual income. Teresa's table flip at the season 1 dinner in a home that was being purchased through a combination of fraud and false documentation became one of the most iconic moments in franchise history. The table itself probably cost more than what the show was paying her at the time. The bankruptcy filing triggered federal scrutiny that revealed what the Giudice had done to fund the lifestyle they were presenting on television. Federal prosecutors established that from September 2001 through September 2008, they had submitted fraudulent loan applications and supporting documents to lenders to obtain mortgages and other loans. Teresa had applied for a mortgage in 2001 by claiming she was employed as an executive assistant and had submitted fake W-2 forms and fake pay-ups for a mortgage in 2005. She and Joe had claimed she was a realtor making $15,000 a month. She was not employed at the time. They had done this across multiple transactions totaling in excess of $5 million in fraudulently obtained funds. And then when they filed for bankruptcy in 2009, they compounded the fraud by lying to the bankruptcy court. They were required to disclose all assets, all income, and any anticipated increase in income. They concealed businesses Joe owned, income from a rental property, and Teresa's actual income from RHOB, which was not insignificant by the time the second season was being filmed. They concealed the anticipated income from the upcoming second season of the show. In other words, they filed for bankruptcy protection by lying to the court about the money the television show about their lifestyle was generating. On March 4, 2014, both Teresa and Joe entered guilty plea to 41 counts of fraud. Teresa was sentenced to 15 months in federal prison. Joe was sentenced to 41 months followed by deportation to Italy. Teresa reported to custody on January 5, 2015 and was released in December 2015 after serving 11 months. Joe reported in March 2016 and served his full sentence before being deported. The Giudice bankruptcy is the franchise's most extreme example of a pattern that appears across nearly every case on this list. The television show was not just a witness to the financial collapse. It was both a symptom of it and a tool for sustaining it. The cameras enabled the performance of wealth that justified the spending that generated the debt that collapsed into the bankruptcy that generated the criminal charges. The show was the mechanism by which the lifestyle was maintained, and the show was the context within which the fraud was most clearly visible in retrospect. Sonja Morgan's bankruptcy is the RH New York entry on this list, and it is genuinely unlike anything else the franchise has produced because of the specific person it involved. John Travolta. Sonja joined Real Housewives of New York City in Season 3 as the elegant townhouse-owning former wife of a J.P. Morgan heir figure that the show needed to round out its portrait of Manhattan social life. What had not aired yet because it was still working its way through the court system was that Sonja was in the middle of a financial catastrophe that had been building for several years before the cameras found her. The origin of Sonja's financial trouble was a film she had attempted to produce through her company Sonja Productions. The film was called Fast Flashdabang Time and it was to star John Travolta. The production arrangement fell apart when Travolta's conditions, which Sonja described in her bankruptcy papers as various conditions her company could not meet, the project impossible to execute. The production company that had partnered with her, Hannibal Pictures, sued Sonja in California. The court ruled against her in September 2009 and awarded Hannibal a judgment of $7 million. By the time bankruptcy court administration fees were added, the total obligation was closer to $9 million. Sonja filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in November 2010. Her petition listed $19.8 million in debt against $13.5 million in assets. She had simultaneously been fighting a difficult divorce from John Adams Morgan, who had been court-ordered to pay her $3 million in settlement funds, but was refusing to cooperate with the sale of shared assets that would have generated that payment. She was on a television show about wealthy New York women. She was $19.8 million in debt. The Chapter 11 process lasted 7 years. She submitted at least 2 reorganization plans that the bankruptcy court rejected. At one point, a trustee was given control of her assets, the full authority to sell what she owned in order to pay creditors. Rather than leaving those decisions in Sonja's hands, she eventually sold her homes in Colorado and France to generate the funds needed to satisfy the judgment. She held on to her Manhattan townhouse. By 2015, she told E! News that the case was behind her. I paid what I had to pay, and it wasn't easy, but at the same time it was an experience. It's nice to be free of everyone looking at my money. I finally have my financial privacy back." Then 1 year later, she was sued by her own bankruptcy attorneys for failing to pay $350,000 in legal fees. That case was eventually dismissed. The irony of Sonja Morgan's bankruptcy is not the John Travolta connection, though that detail is obviously remarkable. It is that Sonja is one of the most financially self-aware cast members in franchise history. She has discussed money on the show with a candor that other cast members avoid entirely. She has talked about managing costs, about the realities of living on an income that fluctuates, about what the townhouse actually represents to her stability. And underneath all of that transparency, she was carrying a $9 million legal judgment that took 7 years to resolve. The most recent and most chaotic financial collapse in the franchise is the Kim Zolciak and Kroy Biermann situation, which has unfolded across 2023-2024 and into 2025 with the specific energy of a slow-motion disaster being documented in real time because both parties are still fighting each other as much as they are fighting their creditors. Kim and Kroy filed simultaneous divorce petitions in May 2023, withdrew them in July, and then Kroy refiled in August. The financial picture that emerged from the divorce proceedings was extensive and specific. The IRS filed a lien for over $714,000 in unpaid 2018 taxes. Federal and state tax liens combined exceeded $1 million. Their Georgia mansion, the 15000 QFT 7-bedroom, 11B property that had been the centerpiece of their Don't Be Tardy reality show, was in default on a $1.65 million loan. Truist Bank moved to foreclose. The couple spent more than a year attempting to sell the mansion before the auction date arrived. The price started at $6 million. It was cut to $4.5 million, then to $3.95 million. Then Kroy received an offer of $3.5 million, and Kim refused to accept it. He filed an emergency motion to remove her from the decision-making process entirely, accusing her of racking up unnecessary expenses and refusing to accept reality. She accused him of trying to force a sale below market value. The home was eventually auctioned. By that point, total debt, including the IRS liens, the mortgage, a home equity line of credit, multiple attorney fee liens from lawyers who had stopped being paid, credit card debt across multiple accounts, including American Express and Saks FTH Avenue, and a state tax lien for $15,000 in unpaid Georgia taxes represented a financial situation so comprehensive and so multidirectional that no single settlement could resolve it. What the Kim and Kroy situation added to the franchise's bankruptcy mythology was something genuinely new. The spectacle of two people in the middle of a financial crisis, so severe that the bank was taking their house using the proceedings of their divorce to fight each other rather than to cooperate on a resolution. Their mutual antagonism was more expensive than either of them. Every emergency hearing Kroy filed, every refusal of Kim to accept a reasonable offer, every attorney fee that went unpaid cost them money they did not have. The mansion sold for a fraction of what it had been worth when it was the set of their television show. Bethany Frankel's observation that the women in this franchise often can't afford the lives they're living is the thruffin that connects Tammy Knickerbocker losing the biggest house in Coto de Caza in 2000 to Kim Zolciak watching her mansion go to auction in 2024. The show does not cause these collapses, but it does not prevent them either. What it does consistently is provide the context in which the performance of financial health is most important to maintain, and therefore the context in which the gap between the performance and the reality is most dangerous to let continue for too long. The cameras always find the gap eventually. The court documents confirm what the cameras found, and the franchise moves on to the next season, where there are new women performing new versions of financial certainty, and somewhere in the back of the production schedule, the next set of court filings is being generated.